Recorded.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the Respectability webinar for June 6th, 2016. My name is Phillip Pauli. I am the Policy and Practices Director for Respectability, and I am absolutely delighted to share with you best practices in action, focusing on South Dakota. This is the first of our series of summer learning opportunities, and we're very glad that you could join us today. As you know, Respectability is an organization focused on empowering Americans with disabilities to pursue the American dream. We do this by advocating and educating around policies and best practices that are really driving the needle forward and helping more people to become empowered. And we are absolutely pleased today to shine a light on the state which is really leading the nation in terms of employment outcomes for people with disabilities. And that state is South Dakota. And I have the absolute pleasure and the honor of introducing Secretary Gloria Pearson, who's going to be talking about her work and how her governor has been really leading the nation on jobs. Now, before I do that, I just want to extend a quick thank you to our sponsors for this. JPMorgan Chase has been very generous in supporting in these webinars and providing them for free to the public. So now I'm going to turn things over to Secretary Pearson and her wonderful team. Take it away.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hello, my name is Gloria Pearson. I'm the Cabinet Secretary of the Department of Human Services in South Dakota. I was appointed by Governor Dugard in August of 2013 and began as Secretary in November. I've been working in the field for 28 years, and most of my experience is in the private sector. I'm very pleased to serve a governor so committed to employment of people with disabilities. Also with me today is Eric Weiss. Eric is the Director of the Division of Rehabilitation Services. Eric and I have been invited by Respectability to share information on best practices, and we're very excited to be here. After the PowerPoint, Eric and I will be available for questions. I'd like to start with a little background information. 51% of South Dakotans with disabilities are employed, making the state #1 in terms of having the highest employment rate of any state in the nation. And earlier this year, I was delighted to learn that our state was ranked #1, and perhaps there is a correlation with our state's initiatives. We hope so. We do have employers from every sector, from airlines to supermarkets, from banking to construction, all working together to break down employment barriers for people with disabilities. And although we're proud of South Dakota's employment rate of people with disabilities, I want to note that we don't take credit as a division or a department for the state's performance. We'd like to, but there are just so many other factors like the availability of jobs, for instance, and the state's low unemployment rate that also play a role in the state's performance in these measures. And also noted on the slide in bullet 2, you see that in 2014, 34% of U.S. civilians with disabilities between the ages of 18 and 64 were employed, compared to 75.4% of people without disabilities. And that's a gap of 41%. It also points out that there's variation in the rates of employment between the states. They vary from a high of 50.1% to a low of 25.6%. This slide shows South Dakota's performance compared to the national average over a several-year span. Survey results also showed that South Dakota ranked 5th in the nation in the difference between the respective employment rates of people with and without disabilities. These statistics are from the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey, which we call ACS, is an ongoing survey that provides information on an annual basis about people in the U.S. Every year, the U.S. Census Bureau contacts over 3.5 million households across the country to participate in the survey. And there is information about the survey online that covers sample size, data quality, and other details if you're interested. The ACS disability-related data can also be found in the Annual Disability Statistics Compendium. The compendium gathers the most recent national statistics on people with disabilities from various federal programs and agencies. The compendium provides current statistics and time trends related to the prevalence of disabilities, as well as key indicators on employment, health, community living, and other outcomes of importance in monitoring the well-being of individuals with disabilities. There are also a number of tables and so forth available with the report. This slide is from the Disability Statistics Annual Report. Americans with disabilities are still facing disproportionately low rates of employment compared to Americans without disabilities. So as you can see, there's still a lot of work to do. This slide shows the employment gap comparing South Dakota to the rest of the nation. This is the difference between the respective employment rates of people with and without disabilities. And as I mentioned, in 2014, the gap was 75% employment rate for people without disabilities and 34% for people with disabilities, a gap of 41%. As we confront some of the broader challenges around developing our workforce and creating jobs, it's important to keep in mind that not everyone is affected equally. Individuals with disabilities should have, to the extent possible, the same opportunities as others do to live close to family and friends, to live independently and safely, and to contribute to their communities, and to engage in productive employment. So why is it important to close the employment gap? There are many reasons this makes sense. Just to name a few, there's the willing workforce. People with disabilities have demonstrated ability and are an untapped resource. It's also the smart thing for government to do. Individuals with disability are heavily reliant on government benefits. And when people with disabilities are employed, they're less reliant on government payments, and they contribute to the economy. It also makes very good business sense. Individuals with disabilities are a valuable asset for business. There are business models throughout the United States with proven results. Before we share information on some of the recent initiatives that have taken place in South Dakota, I'd just like to highlight a few things. South Dakota has benefited from strong leadership from the top when it comes to employment for people with disabilities. Governor Dugard first championed the cause in 2012 as a part of the National Governors Association. Governor Markell from Delaware was the chair of the NGA, and he led an initiative with Governor Dugard called A Better Bottom Line, employing people with disabilities. Governor Dugard initiated South Dakota's Employment Works Task Force in 2013 that was formed to make recommendations aimed at increasing the employment rate of people with disabilities in South Dakota. The governor has since helped out with our Ability for Hire campaign that provides resources and technical assistance to businesses. And he also annually hosts the Governor's Awards, a ceremony that recognizes the achievements of employers, individuals with disabilities, and other South Dakotans for their contributions towards the rehabilitation and employment of people with disabilities. The Employment Works Task Force was a big step in the right direction. The group considered programs in South Dakota that were working in terms of employing people with disabilities, and they also identified areas of need, formulating recommendations and action steps that we could use to increase employment of South Dakotans with disabilities. The findings of the task force included, first of all, that we should find and support businesses to employ people with disabilities, and second, that we should connect businesses to employees with disabilities. 3, that we eliminate disincentives that exist to employment. 4, that we develop flexible systems and promote promising practices. And 5, that we educate the public, providers, employers, and people with disabilities. I think we're beginning to reap the benefits of the seeds planted by that task force, which grew into the Employment Works initiative. Okay, now to some of the initiatives that have been designed to impact the employment rate here in South Dakota. First, we recognize there is a need to support businesses in their efforts to hire people with disabilities. The Ability for Hire campaign was started because we heard that some businesses were ready and willing to hire people with disabilities, but they just didn't know where to start. This campaign includes the Ability for Hire website, advertising, and hard copy information that is designed to support businesses who want to hire people with disabilities. Through this campaign, we've been identifying businesses who have championed the cause. Common sense tells us that businesses are more trusting of other businesses than they would be of a government agency. So businesses like Camille's Sidewalk Cafe in Sioux Falls are spreading the word. They already know the benefits of hiring people with disabilities, and Camille's owners have been willing to give of their own time to help. In the coming year, there will be more outreach to other businesses, and we will add more testimonials to the website. Focusing on what people can do is the key, and that is how we change perceptions of disability, not only in our state, but in the country. We think it's how together we will increase the employment of people with disabilities. And through the Ability for Hire campaign, we can shine a spotlight on what people can do. Here are 3 videos that were created for the Ability for Hire campaign. This first video features Kendra Gottlieben. Kendra's video received a Marcom and a Telly Award. Kendra is employed at the Center for Disabilities in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
But because I have a disability, I had to work a little harder to get there. I'm just glad someone gave me a chance.
People with disabilities make up a powerful workforce. Ready, willing, and extremely able.
Our second video that we'd like to share features the Governor of South Dakota, Governor Dennis Daugaard.
I'm Dennis Daugaard. Both of my parents had a disability, but both were given an opportunity to work so they could support my sisters and me. I encourage South Dakota employers to give people with disabilities the opportunity to work alongside their friends and neighbors. Join the movement, share the idea of Ability for Hire with others, and let's put this large, powerful, and untapped workforce to work.
The last video we'd like to share with you features the Sioux Falls business Camille's Sidewalk Cafe that I've mentioned.
When we opened Camille's 11.5 years ago, we thought, well, why wouldn't we hire someone with a disability? They're really good workers and a tremendous asset to our business. They have an enthusiasm and a pride in their work that we don't see in a lot of workers. There are really no more obstacles than hiring any other member or employee.
People with disabilities make up a powerful workforce. Ready, willing, and extremely able.
The department has created campaign materials and graphics for our social media sites as well. We post the material on social media and videos on our YouTube channel. As you can see by the numbers, we're reaching a large group through Facebook, for the size of our state anyway, and we're hoping to see this grow. We do think that more and more we are seeing social media as an effective outreach tool. We also heard from the task force that businesses value a single point of contact, someone that can help a business make things happen. The Division of Rehabilitation Services created a business specialist position with this purpose in mind. This is similar to what other VR agencies are doing in other states to treat businesses as their customers as well. We feel it's important to reach out to our employers. Our vocational rehabilitation staff have become increasingly involved in non-disability related business organizations, like the local chambers of commerce. This offers additional avenues to connect businesses to potential employees with disabilities. VR helps to support business-to-business organizations in larger communities, too. These organizations help to provide education and technical assistance in areas where there is a large concentration of businesses. We refer to these organizations as business resource networks. The business resource networks provide businesses with education, awareness, and resources to promote the successful hiring of people with disabilities. And by clicking the link at the right, at the bottom of the page, it'll take you to the Business Resource Network website. As we all have found, sometimes the internet can be a powerful tool for individuals with disabilities when finding employment. We've enjoyed some success with our Ability for Hire campaign. Recently, the department nominated Camille's Sidewalk Cafe in Sioux Falls for the Ruderman's Best in Business Award. This award is given to a business who trains, hires, and supports people with disabilities. We also received 3 international awards for outreach with this campaign, 2 Marcom Awards and a Telly Award. To highlight a couple of our other initiatives, first of all, vocational rehabilitation has offered contracts to community support providers to increase the capacity of their community employment programs. These funds were made available through RFPs, and they support a portion of new employment specialist salaries for a limited period of time. 17 community providers were awarded funding to expand services, and vocational rehabilitation helps with the oversight, training, and technical assistance for these. In order to develop the quality of job developers in the state, we now offer a higher fee-for-service rate for employment specialists who receive their Certified Employment Support Professional credentials through the Association of People Supporting Employment First, which, as you guys know, is called APSE. As a part of this, vocational rehabilitation helps with the one-time cost of the exam and the ongoing training needs for the employment specialist, too. So we went from 0 certified employment specialists in the state of South Dakota to 75 as a result of this. A more recent partnership has developed with the South Dakota Retailers Association. This is a 3,900 member statewide business organization that provides services to and represents the interests of retail businesses. They understand the role that people with disabilities can play in meeting the workforce needs in their businesses in South Dakota. They've welcomed vocational rehabilitation to provide training to businesses. They've promoted the department's initiatives in their newsletters, and most recently were one of the 3 organizations nationwide that was selected for a pilot program with the Office of Disability and Employment Policy that is aimed at increasing workplace inclusion of people with disabilities, entitled Getting Down to Business. Also included in the Department of Human Services is the Division of Developmental Disabilities. This is the division that manages our home and community-based waiver that provides supports and services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in South Dakota. The division has taken a number of actions to incentivize employment in the community system for people supported. They've done this by providing resources to the community providers and by facilitating discussions on community employment. To highlight a few things that they have done, first of all, they increased the supported employment rates. And secondly, they worked with rehabilitation services on the establishment grants to fund the employment staff of community providers. Third, they've created some tools that have been helpful to providers in the employment area. One in particular called Person-Centered Employment Guide. And we've also eliminated a disincentive to work that existed in the waiver. Schools all across South Dakota have participated in what we call Project Skills that provides paid work experience to students with disabilities. Schools provide the job development, job coaching, and follow-along. Vocational rehabilitation pays the wages, and the students gain valuable soft skills and work skills that prepare them for transition from high school to the workforce. So I'd just like to thank you for your attention and for giving me the chance to share these initiatives. We're available now for any questions that you might have.
All right, first question coming up right here.
Secretary, this is Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, President of Respectability, and I just could not thank you enough, not only for this terrific presentation, but far more importantly for this breakthrough work, which really sets a national standard. I want to personally congratulate you because the outcomes that you're getting with your very high employment levels compared to other states really gives inspiration to all the other states that have half the outcomes that it is indeed possible. When we look at states like, Vermont or Maine or West Virginia, some of the other states where they're getting, not nearly the outcomes that we're getting from, in your case, you provide an inspiration for everyone. But listening to your presentation, I had sort of three questions that I wanted to ask. The first of which is, what sort of surprised you in this process? What was the unexpected process or piece of information as you went through it? And secondly, did you get any money back through Ticket to Work or anything else because you were able to get people off of federal benefits? I know, for example, that the state of Wisconsin got tremendous amount of money from the Social Security Administration because they got so many people off of benefits by getting jobs. So my second part was, did you see any financial benefit from doing this? And then my third piece is about the moving conversation in Washington around criminal justice reform, that we're seeing a real bipartisan consensus that a lot of the nonviolent offenders who have been in prisons and jails for so long in America should be released. We know at Respectability, because we're working very deeply on a white paper on these issues that we're going to be releasing on June 20th, that the prisons and jails are absolutely filled with individuals with disabilities. Have you started to think through how that might impact your work if a large number of previously incarcerated individuals become returning citizens and need services to try and get jobs as they re-enter into their communities? So thank you again for your work. That's three different questions. We're really excited about the progress that you're making in your state.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for your very kind words. I appreciate that, and we are more than happy to share anything that we've learned with anyone that would like to benefit from our experience and make it their own. As far as surprises, I'm not sure if you mean in the process of kind of compiling this information or just in general since we've been doing this. But I guess, I haven't had a lot of surprises. I've been very happy with the cooperation and the wonderful interest that we've found among employers and just all the different stakeholders who are so willing to step forward and help with anything that we're trying to do, and that's been wonderful. Your question about the ticket to work, we have absolutely seen financial benefits. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I know it's over $1 million and more than that in terms of money that we've received for getting people to work. And you know, your comments about the criminal justice system, I'm aware of those issues, and I do know that, like all of our rehabilitation programs, are probably going to need to be a part of the success of getting people back to work. I don't know much about that in our state right at this point, but we certainly have had some criminal justice reform as well, which is making a big difference in the lives of people. I want to give Eric Weiss, our division director, a chance to mention a couple of thoughts that he has as well.
I'll just mention one more thing. Thank you, Gloria. You know, when it came to the Employment Works Task Force and the input from employers in particular, that was something that really helped to create some of the recommendations that Gloria shared earlier. The employers were pretty outspoken about what they felt the current landscape was of hiring people with disabilities in South Dakota, and they were they were outspoken in what they felt was key to moving that initiative ahead.
Now, quickly, I know we have a question in the chat box, but operator, do you want to just remind folks how to ask a question by phone?
Participants who are listening over the phone can press 7#, that's 7, followed by the pound sign on your telephone keypad to indicate that you'd like your line unmuted. That's 7# on your telephone keypad.
Great. And do we have any phone questions? Because I know we have one in the chat box.
Go ahead.
Not at this time.
All right. So Jenny M. asks, is there a type of business that is prevalent in hiring people with disabilities, such as restaurants, perhaps? Secretary, do you want to take that first?
Sure. We'll go ahead and answer this, and Eric has some thoughts he'd like to share on this.
You know, I think we see in the state, and it's come through in a recent state plan, that there's some high demand occupations in the state. And probably that's similar in states across the nation. So those are positions, a lot of times these are entry-level positions, and there are opportunities there for people with or without disabilities. You know, I think the question asks about a type of business that is prevalent in hiring people with disabilities, such as restaurants. And I would say yes, that's an opportunity that is a lot of times readily available for people, like I said, with or without disabilities to find employment. But I think there's other businesses out there as well that are looking, that have workforce needs, and they're not looking for necessarily the entry-level positions so much, but the middle management positions, the skilled employees that they need to fill their workforce demands.
Yeah, I apologize. We don't have our charts in front of us, but we do chart this data at the end of the year in terms of where people have found employment in which sectors of the economy. And as I recall, it is fairly broad. I mean, there's some manufacturing, some management, some retail, and a variety of things. But can't give you the specifics today, sorry.
No, you still talk about great things. I mean, we know, this is Phillip Pauli from Respectability, we know from looking at the work that Project Search is doing that they've had great outcomes training youth with disabilities to go into hospitality jobs, healthcare jobs, and jobs in elder care. But, you know, the sky is the limit when it comes to properly training and preparing people. I mean, I've even interacted with, if you can believe this, deaf forklift operators in distribution center down in Las Vegas. So with the right training and the right supports, people can really achieve whatever they want to. Now, next we have a question from Pamela M., who asks, what is the minimum wage in your state, and what is the average wage of the people with disabilities who get jobs?
The minimum wage right now is $8.55. I don't believe I have the average wage on hand right now.
But do you have sub-minimum wage, a lot of use of sub-minimum wage through the sheltered workshops, or is predominantly, are you working towards the competitive integrated employment, and how do you balance that?
There are about 17 or so sheltered workshops in the state that are paying minimum wage. I just heard recently that one has made the decision not to do any sub-minimum wage work, and we are doing a lot of work with our providers to educate them and to work towards eliminating the sub-minimum wage. Also, our State Developmental Center has made the decision not to do any sub-minimum wage work as well. So it's a work in progress, I would say.
Definitely. Great. So we have another question online, which is from Steve A., who works in VR from another state. And his question is, how did you get the governor to lead this initiative? Was it his personal connection because of his parents?
His personal connection certainly does make him very interested in the field. And it really did not take much coaxing. He's just very interested and wants to make sure people with disabilities have opportunities in the state. He firmly believes that people with disabilities work harder than people without disabilities because they have to, and that they are a tremendous untapped resource that we want to make sure, you know, we give every opportunity that we can.
And then the next question, back on the sub-minimum wage issue, from Kenda. She's asking, is South Dakota supporting people with disabilities who are participating in sheltered programs and getting to achieve competitive integrated work?
Yes, because we're a small state, we don't have as many providers as most states, but all of the providers that we do have that have sheltered workshops or sub-minimum wage also have an active supported employment program, and that is their preferred service, but they, you know, obviously not everyone's in it. That is where those relationships that we talked about, where rehabilitation services contracted with those providers to help them beef up their supported employment staff in order to grow that part of their business. So again, that's a work in progress, but I think that they're headed in the right direction.
Great. Well, thank you for answering that. Now, I have a slightly different question. Talking about employers and job sectors where people with disabilities can succeed, some of our listeners may not know that about Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, where now new regulations have put a requirement for all federal contractors to have 7% of their workforce in all job categories be qualified individuals with disabilities. Have you been doing any outreach to federal contractors, and have you had any successes with partnering with them to get them trained for jobs?
This is Eric Weiss, and no, we haven't done a lot of outreach to federal contractors in South Dakota. We have done some through our business specialist, who's working with all businesses in South Dakota to get information out to federal contractors and to make vocational rehabilitation a resource, I guess, when it comes to connecting those businesses with people with disabilities. But in terms of specific campaign or outreach targeting federal contractors, we haven't got to that point yet.
And then another question with that is, we know the power of high expectations and supporting youth with disabilities to start thinking about what happens when the school bus doesn't come anymore. So I'm curious, have you have any efforts around outreach to parents and supporting them and helping them to really work on helping their kids become successfully employed, both when they're still in school and out of school?
That's a good question, and it's something that I forgot to mention earlier when when it comes to that Employment Works Task Force. That was another thing that came through loud and clear, not from the businesses, but from the parents that were on the task force. They recognized the need to reach out to families, to reach out to people with disabilities, and do so at a young age in order to change the mindset and to change the expectations of not just the people in the community, but or the individuals with disabilities themselves, but the family members at a young age.
Great. Operator, do we have any phone questions?
No one waiting on the phone.
I see a note in the chat box about reverse integration.
Sorry, I misread the question. So can you speak to the reverse integration piece?
Well, I don't know that there's a concerted effort with that going on right now. What I can tell you is that there is some interest in opening venues, and I will just use the example because it's the best one that we have. Art centers where artists come in and paint or sculpt or do what they do, and those are integrated with other artists, and there's a real partnership, and then they have like a retail opportunity for selling their art and so forth. Now that wasn't really what the question was, but that's the kind of an example I can give of something that's going on in the state.
Great. I'm trying to... So something I know we haven't really touched on that always weighs in is there's a lot of rural states out there that really struggle with access to transportation, and for many people, transportation, especially in rural areas, is a critical barrier to employment. What are you doing around the issue of transportation, access to transportation, anything like that?
This is Eric again. When it comes to rural states, you're right. Transportation is something that we hear about as a need. We hear about it from the Centers for Independent Living. We hear about it from surveys that we do to other groups of people with disabilities. And there's not a lot of easy answers out there. And, when it comes to vocational rehabilitation, it's something that we can help with on the short term. And we can also give people skills to, help them develop skills to access public transportation. But in some of those more rural communities, there simply aren't any options. And so that's when it comes down to being creative, using some natural supports, and figuring out a way to get from point A to point B.
And then, so I'm curious. I really loved the video that you did of the Sidewalk Cafe and really getting that business perspective on what it's like hiring people with disabilities. I'm curious, are there any specific struggles that you've had with getting small businesses on board with hiring the diverse talent that people with disabilities bring?
When it came to the businesses that you see in those videos, those are the ones that were that really championed the cause, like Gloria mentioned before. Camille's has been, for instance, has just been awesome, and I think my recommendation to other agencies, other states that are interested in doing something similar is to look to those small businesses first, because it was easier at times to get them on board than some of the larger businesses who have more levels of bureaucracy, and it takes a while for them to get permission to get involved in something like this, where Camille's Sidewalk Cafe, for instance, just said, yep, we'll do it, and took off from there.
Any phone questions?
Not at this time.
All right. Any more questions from our, let me ask them. And then, so another question I'm curious is, it sounds like you've got a very involved developmental disability council that's been working very hard on these issues. What has your relationship been like with them? What kind of role have they played? And then that feeds into another question is, like, advocates in the community, what role can they play in further expanding job opportunities for people with disabilities?
That's a good question. Yes, we do have a good relationship with their council. It's a small state, and so they're just kind of right down the hall, and they lend their support to many things that we'd like to do. You know, I think that the fact that we are such a small state, sometimes the referrals just come through friends and neighbors and contacts, and it's really easy to kind of get things done when there's so few people involved that you have to work with. There just aren't a lot of layers of bureaucracy that way.
Great. All right. Any other questions from the phone audience?
No questions on the phone.
Right. All right. Eric and Daniel and Gloria, I'm curious, are there any kind of final parting thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with? Any key takeaways that you want people to really take home and think about what they can do on their work?
Nothing comes to mind. I just thank you all for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you all, and if anybody wants to contact us in the future for any information, our information is on the slides, and we'd be happy to help any way we can.
Eric?
In addition to that, I would just, you can find information on the Employment Works Task Force and other resources out on our website at dhs.gov. Is that right? Or, I'm sorry, sd.gov, yes.
Fabulous. All right. Well, on behalf of Respectability, thank you so much, Team South Dakota. We love what you're doing, and we hope that other people in other states will really learn from you about what's working and what's really effective at empowering people with disabilities to pursue the American dream. This will conclude today's webinar. Next, I would love to invite everybody who participated today to check out our next webinar, which is going to be next week, June 15th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The focus is going to be a little different. We're going to be talking about the Renewing the Commitment Guide, an ADA training for nonprofit professionals, showcasing the work of the Chicago Community Trust, and our lovely speaker on the June 15th is going to be Irene Bowen, president of ADA One LLC. This topic will really show kind of understanding the impact and the requirements of the ADA, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, on nonprofits. And we're really excited to offer this webinar to you for free due to the generous support of JPMorgan Chase. And lastly, here's our contact information. If you ever need to reach out to us, please ask us a question. The links to the download the slides are in the chat box, and we'll be posting a fully accessible version on our website shortly. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and this concludes today's webinar.
The moderator has